Hello there. I'd like to cover some questions that came in from one of our students, Muzaffar. So let's take a look. We've got 7 items here to talk about. The first one is closing activity needed, page 123, PMBOK. I believe this is in reference to the audit process that is talked about in item 2. So let's first of all talk about the closing activities in project management. It is important that you realize these are not in rote, strict fashion, like you must do step 1 first and then step 2 and then step 3. No, everything on page 123 needs to be understood, and also everything on page 123 you need to realize may not follow the strict order as is listed by bullet points. One thing, though, you need to realize is you should not release resources until those resources are truly done with what they have been assigned to. So everything on page 123, when you're reading it, bear in mind that if you release your resources too early, you may not be able to do some of those activities because those individuals are needed for some of those activities, and it's on a project-by-project basis. So one of the bullets there says reassign personnel. Well, you will reassign personnel, but you will not reassign personnel before you, for example, finalize lessons learned. So manage knowledge sharing and transfer is listed after reassign personnel, but that doesn't mean that you do it in that strict order. So instead of cramming this area, I recommend reading it, absorbing it, understanding it, and thinking about real-world projects and instances where you would use some of these actions talked about. Now, the PMI say actions and activities necessary to ... or activities needed to. So it's up to you to rationalize when to do each of those steps. But a lot of those steps do not need to be done in the strict order that you see. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, the next question, the audit project success or failure. The question is this an actual audit performed at closing or just collection and updates of audits that are performed during pertinent processes? No. If it were not done at the end in closed project or phase, then you would have seen mentions of audits similar to this all throughout. No, this is indeed a formal or informal audit that you would carry out at the end of the project. It really depends. If you read under meetings on page 126, it says meetings are used to confirm that the deliverables have been accepted, to validate that the exit criteria have been met, to formalize the completion of the contracts, to evaluate the satisfaction of stakeholders, to gather lessons learned, to transfer knowledge and information from the project, and to celebrate success. Attendees may include project team members and other stakeholders involved in or affected by the project. It says these meetings include but are not limited to closeout, reporting meetings, customer wrap-up meetings, lessons learned meetings, and celebration meetings. So the bottom line is you do hold meetings to understand if indeed the project was a success or a failure in the eyes of the stakeholder. And again, this could vary from project to project. One of the other places you find expert judgment in closing mention audits is on page 126, and the second bullet under expert judgment, it reads, expertise should be considered from individuals in the following topics, and then it mentions audit. Why? Because an audit could be carried out when closing the project. A lot of the things in the PMBOK guide, you must realize these are not hard and fast rules. So they're not cookie cutter, but you do need to understand the concept of audits in the event that they are required. They're not always required, but if they are, they need to be done. Number 3 asks for in-depth scenarios for risk strategies. So for risk strategies, I want to recommend, first of all, watch the videos on Vimeo. There are a lot of details there. I break it down and I read a few of the pages in the PMBOK guide with the students. So if you're having trouble understanding these strategies, I really want to focus your attention to Chapter 11 and all of the plan risk responses sections there for escalate, avoid, transfer, mitigate, accept, and so on. Let me give you a very quick example. It is very important that you read PMI's account and you understand PMI's account without adding extras that may not necessarily give you clarity for the exam. I believe what is in the PMBOK guide from page 442 down has been very well done, and it just needs to be well digested step by step. So let me use the escalate approach as an example. So it starts off saying escalation is appropriate when the project team or project sponsor agrees that a threat is outside the scope of the project, or that the proposed response would exceed the project manager's authority. Now you need to take note of these layups that the PMI is giving you, because questions could be carved out of those. You could get a question that says you're the project manager on a project. You realize that the proposed response from your team members exceeds your authority. What should you do? Avoid, escalate, mitigate, accept. You got to know that that is escalate because it exceeds the project manager's authority. You get what I'm saying? So you have to read every single section where this is. Now, if you continue reading escalate, it says escalated risks are managed at the program level, portfolio level, or other relevant part of the organization. Again, a question could be framed: a risk has been found not appropriate to be handled at the project level. It is now being handled at the portfolio level. Which strategy did the project manager or the project team choose? It's obviously escalate. You see what I'm saying? It goes further to say the project manager determines who should be notified about the threat and communicates the details to that person or part of the organization. Again, you could get a question alluding to who decides who should be notified about the threat. It's the project manager, you see. Last but not least, it says it is important the ownership of escalated threats is accepted by the relevant party in the organization. So it's not enough to confer responsibility on someone. That individual should accept. That falls in my plate. You get what I'm saying? Threats are usually escalated to the level that matches the objectives that would be affected if the threat occurred. Escalated threats are not monitored further by the project team after escalation, though they may be recorded in the risk register for information. You see, it has taken me roughly 3 to 4 minutes to break down one paragraph, but that is exactly what you need to do, step by step, for every one of the other 9 or 10, however many they are. This is exactly what you need to do. Okay? Strategies for overall project risk, strategies for negative risks or threats, strategies for positive risks or opportunities. You need to go through everything, because trust me, PMI has given you good information. Page 442 all the way down. My buddy, the risk doctor who was involved in this, actually has a white paper. Now, I want you to read the white paper. I'll put a link for you to read the white paper, but you have to go into the detail first in the PMBOK guide so you understand where Dr. Hilson is coming from when you read his white paper about risk. I'm going to put a link in the comments so that you can access that. Okay? Another example on page 443 is avoid. Now, for every one of those strategies, towards the bottom, you'll see something like this. Examples of avoidance actions may include removing the cause of a threat, extending the schedule, changing the project strategy, or reducing scope. Some risks can be avoided by clarifying requirements. You see what I'm saying? So you got to go through every example. Every one of these has an example. See? The next one, transfer, it says, transfer can be achieved by a range of actions which include, but are not limited to, the use of insurance, performance bonds, warranties, guarantees. You see what I'm saying? So the PMI have given you examples. What about mitigate? It says, for example, designing redundancy into a system. Okay? So all the examples and stuff you need is all in the book. All right? Those scenarios are in depth. And those are the ones I would recommend you read for what you're asking for 3. Also, you're asking about stakeholder processes. You got to read the processes. And when you read the processes, think about scenarios. It's very simple. Identify stakeholders is what it is, but there's a lot of detail to it that you need to read about how stakeholders are identified and documented. 13.2 is really, now you have identified the stakeholders and you've got an idea of the level of planning that you need to do or the level of engagement that you need for these stakeholders, then plan about how to keep them engaged. You see? And then, not to negate manage stakeholder engagement, you got to manage your stakeholder engagement by keeping them engaged through your actions, working with them, communicating with them, right? And monitor stakeholder engagement. Again, you got to check the stakeholders' temperature. In other words, check if they're happy. Are they okay? Are they happy about how you're engaging them or not? You see, it's very, very pragmatic. And that's why I tell people, read the definitions and the key benefits. And if you've done that, you're good. All right. And then again, watch the videos. The videos have all that you need in there. The videos on the LMS, the videos in Vimeo. They have all that you need. I would recommend reading them or watching them over and over again and reading the project management essentials for clarity. All right. Number 4, the requirements for formal procurement closure are usually defined in terms and conditions of the contract and are included in the procurement management plan. Well, that is not entirely accurate. The conditions of the contract are not in the procurement management plan. The contract type is in the procurement strategy. So I'm not sure where you got that lingo from, but I do not see it when I take a look at the PMBOK guide. Perhaps you got it from a specific section, but I do not see it. So formal procurement closure, I think that's what you are saying. Formal procurement closure. I see. So you're seeing this in the control procurements process under closed procurements. I see what you mean. So let me break this down because it's a little bit incorrect how they have it stated here. The buyer, usually through its authorized procurement administrator, provides the seller with formal written notice that the contract has been completed. Requirements for formal procurement closure, that's to close out the procurement, are usually defined in the terms and conditions of the contract. That is what you want to latch onto. You see, that's what you want to latch onto. The second statement are included in the procurement management plan. That, in my opinion, is slightly off. That is actually not in a procurement management plan because you have not solidified the contract just yet. So I would question that statement and I would not latch onto that statement because it is not worth much. What I would refer to as a reference point for terms and conditions is actually the procurement strategy. Now, it might seem like nickeling and diming of information, but if you go to the PMBOK guide and you read about the procurement strategy, you'll note that it is markedly different from the procurement management plan. So the procurement strategy has delivery methods, contract payment types, and procurement phases. when you talk about the procurement management plan, it has how the procurement will be coordinated. Timetable of key procurement activities, such and such. But when it comes to the actual contract, it's not in the procurement management plan because at the time you put this plan together, the contract wasn't even signed. So I would challenge that as one of the errors in the guide. I would challenge that as being incorrectly worded. Now, when you go to conduct procurements and you look into the outputs of conduct procurements, in other words, you look under the procurement management plan, what you have in the procurement management plan after contract sign is, it says activities to be undertaken during the conduct procurement process. See, and that is on page 484. Oh, that's the input, but the output of that same process, if you look on the back end, what you get out, the updates to the procurement management plan that are stated, you find those on page 490, and it says updates may be required depending on the results of the contracting and negotiations process. In my mind, it's the plan, but it's not the contract. What you actually want to refer to understand terms and conditions is the contract period. So I would challenge that statement, but I wouldn't worry about it. Okay? What you do need to know is what is in the guide, and you do need to know contract types are part of OPAs in plan procurement management. Okay? So I mean, there's not really a scenario needed. The bottom line is contracts include terms and conditions, TOCs. You know, at any level, anywhere in the world, you know, terms and conditions of the contract are always in the contract, not in some plan. Nobody's going to refer to a plan to understand terms and conditions if they're a seller. They're not going to refer to your plan. They're going to refer to the contract. You see what I'm saying? So some of these things we also need to use a common sense approach for some of them. Okay? Good. Number 5, definition of impact scales. I talked about this. So the definition of impact scales in the PMBOK guide is really where they talk about probability and impact definitions on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. When you define that, we can call that defined conditions for impact scales, if you will. All right. Regarding the closing and the initiating process groups, don't worry about those. Just study them, right? Open up your PMP exam content outline and make sure you understand the tasks very, very thoroughly. And I'm telling you what other people did and they succeeded. Read the processes in the PMBOK guide and read the PMP exam content outline. It is going to help you with those two. Okay? There's nothing to worry about. Don't worry about it. Don't. But just make sure that you got it down by reading close project or phase in detail a couple of times, taking notes, rationalizing, visualizing what is there. Okay? And then in initiating, the same thing. Read it, rationalize it, visualize it as a pragmatic project manager. Okay? The last one here says issue log may happen at any time during the project. The issue log is updated as a result of monitor and control activities. Yes, that is one of the places that could happen. You see, when you're reading the PMBOK guide, you need to read it with an open mind that things do not only happen in places where they may be mentioning it. It could happen in so many different places. You get what I'm saying? So don't take it verbatim. Try not to take the PMBOK guide rote, especially for the PMP exam, because it will not convert over to the question logic. So if you ask yourself, what is the issue log? What exactly is the issue log? Well, let's talk about how you see the issue log as an input to a process in initiating. You see, in Identify Stakeholders, you see the issue log as an input. Now you need to be inquisitive and say, oh, well, if the issue log is an input to an initiating process, I don't see any reason why I cannot see it anywhere else along the project. You see, it says the issue log records issues that may introduce new stakeholders to the project. You see that? That immediately should tell you, oh, the issue log could be used as an input to initiating. Therefore, it probably can be used as an input to planning. And it can. If you go to Plan Stakeholder Engagement, you see the issue log is mentioned again. Managing and resolving issues contained in the issue log will require additional communications with the stakeholders affected. You got to remember that it's an iterative thing. These processes, you do them over and over again. So as more information becomes available, you use it. The same thing in Managed Stakeholder Engagement. Now, stakeholders need to be aware of their issues as they're being solved. You see what I'm saying? So going back to your question, it says the issue log also updated during planning and executing, identify risk, perform qualitative and such. Are these considered? No, they're not considered monitoring and controlling activity. So again, when you're reading the PMBOK guide, it is important that you do not take it at face value. Very important, because if you do that, you might make mistakes in questions where the PMI comes from a different angle. You see? So let's read issue log from the source where it happens in direct and managed project work. It says, throughout the life cycle of the project, it didn't just say at the beginning or in the middle or at the end. It said throughout the life cycle of a project, the project manager will normally face problems, gaps, inconsistencies, or conflicts that occur unexpectedly and that require some action, so they do not impact project performance. The issue log is a project document where all the issues are recorded and tracked. And then it gives you a bunch of the issues. And then it says the issue log will help the project manager effectively track and manage issues, ensuring they're investigated and resolved. The issue log is created for the first time as an output of direct to managed project work, although issues may happen, so you need to get this, issues may happen anytime during the project. You see that? And then it says the issue log is updated as a result of the monitoring and controlling activities throughout the project lifecycle. Now, that is not to say that the issue log is only updated in monitoring and controlling. The bottom line is the monitor and control project work process, of course, is an integrative process. It's an overall umbrella process. So this is where it gets into needless weeds in the PMBOK guide that I try to stay away from. The bottom line is that issues are resolved. End of story. That's it. Issues are resolved. Don't put a label on it to say, oh, it's resolved in managed project knowledge, so it's managed project knowledge is a controlling activity. No, don't look at it like that. Look at it as one of the limitations in the language. Unfortunately, there's limitations in the language of the PMBOK guide. But when you think about monitor and control project work, and you think about perform integrated change control, a lot of times these two processes work hand in hand to document who is going to be responsible for resolving an issue by a target date, and perform integrated change control is also used to funnel the change requests in many instances that will solve issues. You get what I'm saying? So in perform integrated change control, believe it or not, you're processing change requests that are actually going to solve certain issues. See, those change requests, they are being reviewed to resolve an issue. So let's say you have an issue and you run the change request through perform integrated change control, and the change control board says, oh, we approve this to solve the issue, you now have an approved change request to resolve an issue. So at the end of the day, all roads will lead to monitoring and controlling for the overall documentation and the overall resolution of these things. So when you assign someone to an issue, where does that happen? We could theorize all day long about it, but honestly, it's a waste of time. The bottom line is this. When PMI gives you a question, they're trying to find out, do you know someone needs to resolve this issue? And do you know that a change request could be needed for it? But the nickel and diamond as far as where was the issue solved and how do you categorize where the issue was solved, it should not be part of the discussion. Because to be quite honest, it's all over the place. And I guess it takes an expert to tell you the PMBOK guide is not 100% foolproof, right? There are places where the documentation is wonky. And a line such as what you quoted, identify risk, perform qualitative and quantitative risk analysis, manage quality and such, those are not monitoring and controlling activities, obviously. You see, but those may be processes where the issues are identified. So let's go to one of the ones you mentioned, for example, 11.1, for example. Let's go there and see where the issue log is mentioned in 11.1. So when you look at 11.1, the issue log is being reviewed. Why? Because in your review of the issue log, you could identify certain issues that were not in the issue log. Or you could identify certain risks that will influence the overall project risk level. You see, the reason why you're looking at the issue log is to make sure that it is complete and concise and that you identify any risks associated with those issues. So after you do that, and let's say you identify some risks, what do? You put them in the risk register. What do you do if suddenly you realize you've got bigger issues than you even thought you did and risks along with them? Well, you update the issue log. You see, if you go over to page 418, it says the issue log should be updated to capture any new issues uncovered or changes in currently logged issues. You see what's happening here? So this is not monitoring and controlling activity. What will be considered monitoring and controlling activity is when you raise a change request that goes through performing a graded change control. That will be a monitoring and controlling event. So what you have in the PMBOK guide, unfortunately, in a lot of places, it's wonky. Look, it's written by humans. It's written by people. So there are places where the loop is not closed, and it's just what we have to live with. But I can tell you, on the exam, because the exam has been through vetting and validating from colleagues and people like me, the trust as far as the question being a fair question to ask is there. So I wouldn't worry about the inconsistencies in the PMBOK guide. Rather, what I would recommend is read the paragraph, and if you get to places where things seem inconsistent, you've done the right thing in letting me know. And I'm telling you, there are a lot of inconsistencies, and this is one of them. And this tells me you are reading deep into the PMBOK guide, which is good. You should read deep into it to get a very robust understanding. But as you read deep into it, you're also going to uncover inconsistencies. But I do not want those inconsistencies to bother you to the point that you cannot move forward in your studying. So what I would recommend is read. If you get to some inconsistencies, validate with me that there are inconsistencies and move on, move forward. You're very close to the end, okay? I know a lot of these things are little bitty distractions, but my advice to you is just keep moving forward, pressing forward. And the fact that you're discovering these inconsistencies, it tells me that you're a lot closer to the finish line, okay? Regarding your mock exam, I think that was a tremendous performance on your mock exam. Not our mock exam, but the mock exam you referred to in the email. I think that was great. And I'll say, just keep on pushing, closing the gaps. Then take our mock exam, close the gaps, take all 3 mock exams, and then take the mini mock exam. And before you know it, you're to the point where you are ready to blow this thing up. Blow it up. All right, so thank you. Very good questions. Again, the PMBOK guide has inconsistencies, but whatever you do, don't follow the strict rote linear listings in the PMBOK guide, whether it is for a process, whether it is for an item as an output. Don't follow the strict rote fashion, because the PMP exam, it has many twists and turns, as you've probably found out as you've taken that mock exam. I would recommend taking the mock exam again and again until you get into the high 90s, maybe even going to 100, and that tells you you've truly understood the concepts, you've understood the ambiguity in that mock exam, and you're ready to face the real thing. All right, so keep pushing. Take a look at what I am including in the text below. It is going to help you. All right, I know it's a bit of a long one. It's almost 30 minutes long, but follow what I'm asking and you'll be much better off. Take care. Bye for now.